Can everyone, I just want to verify, virtually, people hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Long,
Yes.
Dr. Shapiro. Here. Dr. Bieber,
Here.
Dr. McConnell,
Here.
Dr. Wade Smith. Dr. Wade Smith. Mr. Washoe. Ms. Aston.
Here.
Ms. Sephora. Here. Dr. Laskowski. Dr. Laskowski. Mr. Warfel.
Here.
Mr. Robleski. Mr. Eden.
Here.
Dr. Rivera.
Here.
Ms. Gando.
Senator Langerholtz is actually on.
Senator Costa.
Here.
Ms. Momgen.
Here.
Ms. Ackery.
Here.
Ms. Fitterer.
Here.
We have quorum. I wanted to give a reminder, a few housekeeping matters before we begin the meeting. The first is that we are recording the meeting, so if you are in person or virtual, by participation, you're giving your consent to recording. The second is that we have a sign-in sheet that's on the table at the beginning. It was not on the table at the beginning when people were coming in. It's very important that if you are here, please record your name and the information on that, because we will be using that in part to sort feedback. So as you're exiting, please make sure to sign the sign-in sheet. And with that, turn the meeting back to.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Appreciate that. So once again, I'm so delighted to welcome all of you here today to the Southwest region of the state in my home city of Pittsburgh. I feel like all of my friends are out here today. We're honored to be hosted by the Community College of Allegheny County on this beautiful spring day, again, for the fourth of our regional hearings. President Bullock and his staff have offered us this wonderful space, and and we have already been so impressed by their generosity and support of a shared vision for higher education in the Commonwealth. We also thank CCAC for the essential role that they and all of our community colleges play in ensuring access to higher education for all of the Commonwealth's citizens. And I would just add a personal note that my mother-in-law, Frida Shapiro, of blessed memory, was a longtime member of this board of CCAC. I may remember her. And there's she set up a scholarship in her book for students here at CCAC. So I have a very personal love for this institution. So as the hearings proceed, we are gathering invaluable feedback from the field on how to support and strengthen higher education and economic development across the Commonwealth. And at the same time, the work of the board continues. And after our strategic planning hearing, we will turn to some exciting, or at least exciting for those of us on the board, new board business, including a vote on bylaws. Finally, we will have bylaws for our state board and information about a World Economic Development Initiative that the staff is exploring. A link to the World Talent Lab initiative is included in your board materials, board members. The work will be described further by Dr. Shaw in her executive director's report. And essentially, this is a project to strengthen rural post-secondary opportunities directly aligned with local workforce needs. And that speaks to a lot of our campuses across the Commonwealth, including those of Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. So let me turn the meeting over to President Quentin Bullock, who will also offer some brief remarks. Dr. Bullock.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellent. I'm Dr. Quentin Bullock, President for the Community College of Allegheny County, and it is truly a pleasure to welcome you to our campus today. We are honored to host this important hearing of the State Board of Higher Education, and we are delighted to welcome Dr. Cindy Shapiro, Dr. Kate Shaw, and members of the State Board of Higher Education, our elected officials, faculty, staff, students, and community partners. Your presence here means so much, not just to us at CCAC, but to the communities that we serve. This is a special place, and today is a special day. CCAC's mission has always been rooted in access, opportunity, and excellence. As Pennsylvania's third largest community college, we are deeply connected to this region, its people, its industries, and its future. We proudly serve nearly 30,000 credit, non-credit students each year, and whether they come to us to earn a degree, build job-ready skills, or take a single class to better their future, we're privileged to be here to support them every step of the way. With more than 130 academic and career programs, CCAC is renowned as a community college of the future due to our focus on fast-growing fields like healthcare, cybersecurity, automation technology, advanced manufacturing, and culinary arts. And the value we provide is unmatched. Students start at CCAC can save thousands compared to public-private universities, and 81% of our graduates leave debt-free. We recently opened our $43 million Center for Education, Innovation, and Training just next door, a bold investment in the future of education, workforce, and regional prosperity. It is a space that reflects our commitment to innovation and to empowering every individual who walks through our doors. At the Community College of Allegheny County, we believe education is the great equalizer, the key that unlocks potential and transforms lives. We're pleased to play a role in our students' journey, and we are thankful for your partnership as we continue to build brighter futures together. Once again, welcome to the Community College of Allegheny County. We're glad that you're here. We appreciate your time, your support, and your shared commitment to the power of higher education. Thank you, and welcome to the college.
Notably, we are here to hear your views on how to strengthen colleges and universities. At the end of the meeting, we are going to devote roughly a half an hour or so to board business. And I ask, please, that board members who are here in person or on virtually, please remain on to the end of the meeting for board business, particularly because we will be voting on standing bylaws for the board. Okay, with that, let's turn to the hearing, and we're mostly all here for. So here we are. This is our Southwestern PA regional hearing, and I know you've met Dr. Shaw, Executive Director of the State Board. I of course, am chairing the board. And let's go on to the next slide. of the mission. So for those of you who may not be fully aware of the State Board of Higher Education, it is relatively new, under 1 year old. And the mission of the State Board is to provide direction, coordination, and support to ensure that institutions of higher education fully meet the workforce and economic development needs of the Commonwealth. And to do that, ensuring that residents of the Commonwealth have access to the affordable, world-class post-secondary education that our environment of higher education institutions provides here in the Commonwealth. So we have for the first time a coordinating board for higher education for the purpose of meeting economic and workforce development needs. This is not a governing board, it's a coordinating board. But it provides a forum so that we can work together on that goal and work with our governor and our legislature and our business community and other stakeholders in pursuing that. K-12 too, of course, another important stakeholder. So there are 21 members on the State Board of Higher Education, and they represent all of our stakeholders: students, legislators, business leaders, labor leaders, and representatives from the broad range of higher education institutions in the Commonwealth. Go on to the next slide. And today's hearing is just one part of a very broad process that we have going on to get feedback on this state higher education strategic plan. By design, it is very broad. There are many, many different types of people who are invested in higher education. We welcome them to these hearings, and we invite them, and all of you here, of course, today too, to complete a survey instrument that you can access through the QR code on the signs that we have outside this room. Also on our State Board of Higher Education website, we'll share that again at the end of the presentation. So many opportunities to give feedback. We're also holding small meetings and, basically have given out our cell phone numbers too. So that is our goal, is to gain feedback from thousands of Pennsylvanians over the next few months to form the development of this new vision for higher education in the Commonwealth. You are all here to help us in this effort. And for that, again, we thank you. Here we go. Okay. So basically, this is laying out the steps in this strategic planning process as well as the timeline. And the purpose of gathering here today is to share with you the draft strategic plan goals. So 6 overarching goals that represent the strategic plan. And we will present them in the context of information that is related to each, and will demonstrate for each why that goal is so important. And so what we want to do is seek your feedback on those goals, but really even more so on concrete strategies that you would suggest we entertain to meet those goals. And again, as you see on the timeline, it's to be adopted by September 1st of this year. And we are rapidly approaching that date. So we are feeling it. We're feeling the pressure, but in a very good way. So let's get to the goals themselves, draft goals. And we'll be focusing, Dr. Shaw will be taking us through each and presenting information and context around each as we go through this hearing today. But essentially, you can see what they are. We want to increase post-secondary credential attainment. That is the broad range of valuable credentials, including degree and non-degree credentials. We want to ensure affordable pathways to post-secondary credentials, critically important. And then we want to set up strategies to support the economic development needs of the Commonwealth, and on the other side of that equation, the workforce development needs of the Commonwealth. And we see this as two sides of an equation, really. What are the, what is the research and the startups and the businesses to be developed or attract other businesses into the state for economic development? And then how do we make sure that we have the workforce to meet those economic development needs? So the fifth goal is to ensure accountability and efficient use of state funds. Very, very important so that we return our value proposition, so that we maintain and build the trust that all of our stakeholders have in higher education, the public, the legislature, the governor's office. They all want to see the most efficient use of state funds toward our higher education institutions. And we also want to very much ensure by strengthening the fiscal health and stability of the higher education sector that we can continue on this mission. So those are the 6 goals. And how we're going to proceed is to walk through each goal. Kate will present the statewide and regional information, so we're going to get even more specific around this region of the Commonwealth. And then we will open it up to deep suggestions on strategies to achieve each one of these 6 goals. Right, so that, I think I will turn the meeting over to Kate Shaw, who will lead us through the information on higher education in this region and kick off the discussion.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And thank you so much, everybody, for showing up both in person. We have a terrific turnout in person, and I think we also have a terrific turnout virtually. So one of the things that I want to make clear, everybody knows, this is in many ways, this is not your traditional hearing. We're calling this a hearing, and oftentimes hearings have panels of experts. But we kind of turn that idea on its head, and our panels of experts are the people that are here, that are participating in this hearing, and then we're asking to provide feedback for us. I think on purpose, we try to have people from lots of different perspectives who have an interest in higher ed to come to these hearings and to tell us their thoughts. And the basis of the strategic plan that we'll be adopting is really going to be formed by what you tell us. So we're very serious about asking you to please speak up, please provide your perspectives, because the more robust the conversation, the better the strategic plan is going to be. And so my colleague Lubna is going to be running around this room with a microphone. So if we get to the point where we're asking for feedback, just please raise your hand. And my colleague Carrie Iman is going to be taking the helm, making sure that people that have called in virtually have an opportunity to weigh in as well. Okay, we're going to start with this first goal. Increasing post-secondary credential attainment in the Commonwealth is a really important thing for us to do, because the higher the talent base in a state such as Pennsylvania, the more attractive our state is going to be for strong employers, and the more likely people in Pennsylvania will be able to earn a living wage. It doesn't mean that everybody needs a credential, a post-secondary credential to earn a living wage, but we know that an increasing number of jobs require some form of post-secondary education that occurs, of course, after high school. But that doesn't even necessarily mean a 2 or 4 year degree, although it's, we include that. But sometimes we're talking about short-term credentials that give people a foothold into the workplace. So in Pennsylvania, overall, our college attainment level is about average compared to other states. But this map shows you that our attainment levels vary really significantly. So the green colors are the areas where we have college attainment that's higher than the national average. And you see that Pittsburgh in the Southwest area has, some higher levels of attainment, but you see lots of parts of the Commonwealth where college attainment levels are really low. So one of the things that we're doing here is conducting regional meetings, because while we have to develop a strategic plan that will work for the entire Commonwealth, when we think about what strategies we're going to use to meet all of our goals, we know that regional variation needs to be captured in this plan. because there's some, it's very different looking at what the needs might be or where the opportunities might be in the Pittsburgh area compared to sort of the upper tier of the Commonwealth. So it's really important, and we're going to ask you repeatedly, are there specific things we need to know about this region that should inform the strategic plan? And so here's a perfect example of how one size does not fit all when we're talking about things like college attainment. Another thing I want to point out is that over the past 10 years, we have experienced a very substantial drop in the number of students that are enrolling in college. And so what we have here is a chart that shows you the percentage drop over the last 10 years for each one of our sectors. Community colleges, our state-owned university system, our state-related institutions, and the red arrow are the branch campuses. And the purple arrow are the main campuses of our state-related. So you see quite a bit of variation. If you're looking just at the branch campuses, we've seen a pretty substantial drop, and also our independent institutions. So this is a warning sign for us. There's lots of different reasons why attainment levels might be falling, but because we have a goal to increase attainment levels, we need to really think about this. This is one of the reasons we see enrollment dropping. We have what people in the world of higher education call a demographic cliff. We have a dropping number of high school graduates that is beginning to occur, and is going by 2037. We're going to see a 12% drop. So traditionally aged college students, those who enroll shortly after high school, we're going to have a lot fewer of those folks to enroll in college. We also see that the number of adults in Pennsylvania is going to be dropping as well. And that's important because when we think about college students, we can't just be thinking about traditionally aged students. We really have to be thinking about adults as well. And there's a very important bullet at the bottom of this slide. And that's that we have 1.1 million Pennsylvanians that have some college but no degree. So that is a huge number of people who enrolled in college and for reasons unknown ended up not obtaining the credential that they were seeking, but they've made some progress. And they may be a critically important element of reversing the college enrollment drops and also of meeting some of our workforce needs, which I'll talk to you about later. So this is just a map that kind of shows us where our higher education institutions are in the southwestern region of the Commonwealth. And you see a concentration around the Pittsburgh area, and you see other counties that have really none or very few higher ed institutions. And if you could play with this interactive map, which is actually available on the SBHE website, you could begin to see patterns in terms of whether or not people have access to a full range of higher education institutions, ranging from, say, community colleges through state related, or whether or not people live in regions where they don't have a full complement of higher education institutions available to them. So this is some of the data that we look at on a regional level to think about what some of the barriers might be to ensuring that attainment levels are high. So I'm going to pause there. I could give you a lot more data with regard to our attainment levels, but I think the picture is clear. Our attainment levels are low. It's going to help the Commonwealth, and it's going to help people who actually obtain credentials if we raise those attainment levels. And so the first question that I'm always going to ask when we get to the discussion point about each goal is, what don't we know about the Southwestern region and credential attainment that you think we should know? And then what strategies should we use to meet this goal? So you can give us strategies. If you identify a challenge or a barrier, I'm always going to ask you what strategy you would suggest to overcome that barrier. So there's plenty of challenges in higher education in Pennsylvania, which we know really well. But the purpose of this whole process is to get your ideas about how do we meet those challenges? How do we get to where we need to go? So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask, first, I'm going to turn to people in the audience. What are some things you think we should know about the Southwestern part of the state with regard to college attainment? Maybe things about access to affordable education or access to different kinds of post-secondary education. And what should we do in this portion of the Commonwealth to increase our college attainment levels? And if you want to raise your hand if you have something to say, Lubna will find you. And please state your name and your affiliation.
Good afternoon. SBHE, I work at the Pittsburgh Province. I am sure you already know this, but since you framed the question what should we know? And it hasn't, and obviously, we all know that our workforce in Pennsylvania is aging, certainly in southwestern Pennsylvania as well. We have 1.2 million skilled workers in today's workforce who are by age. So we know that we're going to be exiting in the next 4, 5, 6 years, and we're looking at about 740,000 skilled worker shortfall by 2035. So a suggestion and a strategy. A suggestion is that we quantify what we mean by increased post-secondary credential if this haven't happened yet. And the quantification that I recommend. But if we're going to solve that 740,000 skilled worker shortfall, we need to increase the percentage of credentialed Pennsylvanians from the current 40, maybe 50% to about 65% by 2025. That's a very ambitious lift. But I think Pennsylvania deserves an ambitious goal, I understand. A strategy, something that's happening here at the community college that I applaud Dr. Bullock from. And that is the partnership between CZAC and IUP, which can be replicated across the Commonwealth with multiple institutions, where there are 4-year degrees offered from the 4-year granting institution, but here on this campus. So a low-income student who is eligible for a Pell Grant can begin their education here and finish it without having to pay for room and board somewhere else, but get the 4-year credential.
Thank you so much. Excellent, concrete, practical suggestions. Welcome.
Located in Farron County, very rural. I'm here to speak on behalf of public education. And I think first and foremost, the collaboration between higher ed and public education has to be the focal point of that. We need to partner now more than ever before, and we need teachers. As you all know, we have a statewide shortage of teachers in Pennsylvania. And I think we can tackle that a couple different ways. First and foremost, most of these school districts have K-6 elementary school, and these K-4 certifications that we're turning out are not meeting our needs. And I think that can not only attract more people, but also employ more people in the Commonwealth. And then in addition to that, I think that we've got to figure out how to target the current workforce and reverse how we educate them for teaching certification. For example, the career and technical programs, they pull workers out of the field and they give them, a few years to get their attainment for their certification. And it'd be nice to figure out some kind of model like that. For example, we've gone 2 years and haven't been able to fill a math position. So if we could hypothetically find an accountant, bring them in and start teaching math, and then let them work on their attainment, I think there's a whole workforce that we're missing.
So part of what I hear you saying is finding ways to be more flexible about teachers, but also it sounds like you're saying that if we can make it clear what the connection is between what the needs are and the connection between the credential and the jobs, we might be able to get more people to enroll in teacher prep programs or otherwise get certified. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Scott Jason. I manage the Perkins Career and Technical Education Program here at CCS. So thank you for asking. It's a really good question. And you asked specifically about how Southwestern PA is unique. And I would say a lot of the populations that I work with in Southwestern PA are very provincial. So we are a group of people that don't like to drive across bridges, because to get from one end of town to the other. So part of what the Perkins grant requires is that we set up what are called articulation agreements. So these are credit transfer pathways between the high school CTCs and community colleges. And students can save an enormous amount of money and time. So I know that was one of the 6 goals. If you take advantage of these agreements. So we have set up agreements with, for instance, Fayette County Career and Technical Center. Now, it might not, if you look at a map, Fayette County doesn't look like it's really that far from Pittsburgh. But for a child or a student that has grown up in Fayette County and never left, telling them that there's a great ultrasound program at the Boise campus, if you look at a map, it doesn't look like it's that far. But for them, it really is. So a challenge, and you said if we shared a challenge, we would have to share a strategy. So my strategy would be, if you look at the demographics of CCAC administrators, many of us are empty nesters. Why not have a program where we have host families and host students? I know I have 2 extra bedrooms in my house. I would be very willing to.
You're offering your bedroom seat. Don't give out your address yet.
But in some way to bring someone from what seems close but isn't really close to them in their mind, give them an opportunity to be in Pittsburgh, taking advantage of all of the amazing programs that CTAC has to offer.
Thank you. Are there other comments in the room? Oh, there is. Okay. And then we'll turn.
Hi, Dennis Wilkie, president of Rosedale Technical College. I've been leading my organization for 20 years now. We've taken our graduation rates from 50% to 83% last year. There's a couple of major reasons for that. One of them, number one is we have admission standards much higher than schools similar to ours of achieving vocational training. So we accept about 78% of the applicants. That's number one. But the number two thing I think that could be part of the plan is that we run a non-traditional calendar. We go full-time, 48 weeks out of the year. We don't have fall semester, spring semester, take the summer off and go be a lifeguard. Our students want to get in, get out, get a job, start paying their 401k, buy a house, right? And so I think that's been one of the strategies that's been very helpful. However, we are constantly having to run around with the raindrops of regulatory snafus to fit our model into the way field works, into the way Federal Department of Education works to try to fit into their system. So their students get financial support from state and federal aid. And if the state could take a leadership role in opening minds towards different models of education that aren't the same old way of doing things, that would be really helpful and encourages other students to trust the things.
Thank you very much. And we know that there are other states that have been creative in that space in a way that we haven't quite yet. So there are good examples for us to look to. I appreciate that suggestion.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos. I'm Chief Program and Innovation Officer at Department of Work on the Workforce Board. I have a quick question. As it relates to when we're saying increased post-secondary credential attainment, we're talking all credentials, correct?
Yes.
So what I see as a challenge is creating more etched out pathways from non-accredited credentials to accredited credentials. We know that our employers value the speed and flexibility that non-accredited credentials allow, but the job seekers and students like the stability of accredited programs. So I think being able to build out clear pathways that connect the non-credit side to the credit side would be very valuable for this region.
Thank you very much. And that's another thing that we hear a lot about is sort of stacking credentials, making sure that people know they can enter and exit when it is possible for them and when they need to, and seeing that there are clear pathways from one credential to another. So I appreciate that. Do we want to turn to people online?
Yeah. Very happy, Humphrey, you are able to unmute yourself. You are ready to come on.
Are there any other comments? No? So I feel like we could come back to her. I don't know if. Okay. Why don't we take those comments and see if we can help her unmute?
Good afternoon. I'm John Anderson, President of Pennsylvania Western University. It's good to be here with all of you. I want to thank the board for your tremendous work. You've got a good task in front of you. To ask the question, what don't we know about the Southwest region with credential attainment? I think the biggest thing we don't know is where the students we're losing are going after high school. When you integrate all the data sources, it's easy for us to track the aggregate numbers. Who knows if those are declining? We also know that decline in enrollment is falling faster than the demographic decline.
Yes.
There's a gap there of students. And we have not yet found a data system that tracks a student from K-12 through a technical school, through college, through a bachelor or state affiliated institution. And we're losing them just because we don't know where they are.
Mhm.
If you look at the Federal Reserve data, the 16 to 24-year-old in Southwestern Pennsylvania is also not entering the workforce in percentages that they used to. So they're just disappearing.
Mhm.
So if we could have a strategy to track where the students are going and track them if they're in the workforce, so we know where they are, we can better reach them no matter what type of higher education institution they're in.
I appreciate that comment. And one of the things that the board is charged with is collecting data to help us understand where students are. And the Pennsylvania Department of Education has been charged with creating a longitudinal student level data system, which truly most states in the union have, but we do not have. But it's that kind of data, especially if it's connected to employment data, that can help us figure out what's going on with those students. So I appreciate that very much. Thanks, John.
Kathy, before you hear, when you said the comment.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Good. So thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to sharing in this discussion. So as far as time to degree, I have three possible ideas to consider. The first idea is to incentivize high schools to use the senior year as the first year in college, and work with institutions of higher education that would be willing to work inside of the high school system to, in actuality, create that freshman year during the senior year. That would be one suggestion that I have. The second suggestion is that right now, Middle States requires us to have about 120 to 124 credit hours for every single degree, no matter what. I want to recommend that we take a look at that. It's arbitrary. We know here at Carlow that we could provide some of these degrees in 94 hours, which is an entire year that the student would save and get to the marketplace faster. But we would need to be given the permission by the Middle States to give a degree at the 94 credit hour market. I think this is something we really have to take a look at. Other states and other countries have been doing it for years. It's just something that we haven't done yet, but something that I'm very interested in. I'd be happy to be the pilot program for that. And then the last suggestion that I want to put on the table is we need to incentivize employers to help us educate the workforce that they specifically need. So for example, I've learned that we are going to lose about 25,000 civil engineers in the next couple of years, but we're only producing about 10,000 civil engineers. Now, I'm happy to create a civil engineering program, but the reality is that creation cost funds that I don't have. But if there was a corporation that had been incentivized some kind of way with tax credits, whatever, but if they would be incentivized some kind of way to help me create the curriculum and prepare that workforce, I would be, and I think many in higher education would be apt to work directly with those companies or corporations or nonprofits to build exactly what they needed to ensure that their workforce was filled. Now, we have some examples of this working already. For example, some of the hospitals are providing student scholarships if they will stay in, if they will work for that hospital when they graduate. I think we need to try to figure out how to do that across other organizations and other corporations.
Thank you very, oops. So, thank you very, yes.
It's Marty Eisler. I'm a CCAP board member, and I've been on the Student Success Committee for about 20 years. And one thing we know about Southwest region is why our students don't succeed in terms of obtaining the credential, particularly of the associate degree. And that's because they can't pass the math. And many times what we ask ourselves on the committee is, does every certificate or degree require the level of math that we are given and that we are required to give to our students? And what we have always wanted to see is an assessment of, for example, if early childhood education meets the level of math that is prescribed and given to us, and is a major reason why our students are not retained and why they don't succeed in terms of the associate degree. So that is one part of Southwest region that we would like to know about the math curriculum. The other thing is that we need to have supports, as in the Pittsburgh Promise, the coaches. Our students are in need of not just academic advice, but many times other supports that we hope the state will consider funding for us, because it's a major part of student success when students come into us, particularly first generation, and they're not knowing other aspects of what this degree program is going to require of them. And also when they run into obstacles of flat tires or not having an apartment or not having food or whatever it is, we'd like to see the state system recognize that sometimes it's more than just an academic advisor that is needed for our students to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for, we're hearing one more comment, and then we're gonna have to move on because we have, another 5 goals. But we're hearing a lot of things about academic programming and ways to sort of innovate in terms of time to degree, which I think is really important to get on the record, because these are things that we know can be successful. And our job is to figure out how to create a set of incentives and set a policy table that will allow those things to be put in place.
And I'm Chris Purcell, I'm the president of the partners. We see one of the biggest challenges is that public's perception of higher education has changed. For the first time in our country's history, more and more people are questioning the value of higher education. And so, we need to do things like, Dr. Humphrey recommending, 120 credits really is more arbitrary in some cases. With technology and advances, we can educate students faster. We can do more to make going to colleges and universities more affordable. But a strategy is we really have to educate on the value of higher education. Organizations, including the state government, have to communicate the value of higher education.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to goal number 2, but I do want to point out that there is a survey if people want to tell us more about strategies that you can take. All right, so the second goal is closely related to the first goal, right? Ensuring affordable pathways to post-secondary credentials. And when we talk about affordability, we want to note that we're talking about a lot of different ways to define affordability and to track affordability. So it isn't just what the sticker price is of a college, but it's also things like debt level, debt to expected earning ratios. In other words, like the value add or the return on investment. We talk about things like obviously tuition and fees, but policies that reduce costs for post-secondary students, which could also include some of the things that we've already heard, like eligibility for public benefits, increases in appropriation and dual credit enrollment, which we already have in the state. Those things are also really relevant when we're thinking about affordability. So a few pieces of data to note about our wonderful Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are 49th out of 50 states in terms of college affordability. And that is after all of our financial aid is applied. So we are a really expensive state in which to go to college. And the average student debt of those who graduate is $40,000 a year now. That doesn't even take into consideration the people who end up dropping out of college because they're getting scared about the level of debt that they're accumulating. So we have a real affordability issue. And you walk down the street and you ask 5 people, what's the biggest challenge in higher ed? This is what they're going to tell you. It's too expensive. We're not unique in that, but that is something that is actually based in reality. It's expensive to go to college. Doesn't mean it's not worth it, but it does mean that we need to think about affordability and finding ways to increase affordability. So I said earlier, we've got 1.1 million people in Pennsylvania who started college and never finished. We don't know exactly why. We suspect some of that is affordability. As somebody here in the audience pointed out, I think it was you, John, the percentage of recent high school graduates that are choosing to attend college is actually dropping. So not only do we have a demographic cliff, we're going to have fewer high school students, but a smaller percentage of those who are graduating from high school are electing to go to college. Again, we don't know exactly why. Sometimes that has to do with the labor market. Sometimes it has to do with affordability. In a state like Pennsylvania, we have to be concerned about that. And we know at the national level that almost 40% of students who haven't gone to college say that cost and debt contributed significantly. So cost is an issue, and it speaks directly to this question of the value of higher education and whether people think it's worth it. Again, we could talk a lot about affordability. There's a lot of data points that we could put in front of you, but I think that it is clear that we've got a major problem here with affordability that is probably contributing to lots of the other challenges that we are thinking about as the state board determines what our strategic plan should look like. So again, I'm going to ask if there's something about Southwestern Pennsylvania in particular that you believe, sort of impacts affordability in this region. And or what are the statewide strategies we might use to address college affordability in Pennsylvania?
Hi, my name is Matthew McGinty. I teach at Silver University in here at Astra, but our union for faculty and coaches across the state. I want to thank all the participants in this collaborative freedom participation in this novel endeavor. It is appreciated when there is new energy and new groups willing to rally to support our ecosystem. I want to raise the consideration or strategy for us to consider an idea that is not new or novel to 30 states and more in that country across the country, which is a promise program or a place-based scholarship program. As somebody that studies and presents on these kinds of programs, often I can stand here all day and tell you about maybe Wisconsin had raised enrollments by 15%, Tennessee retention by 12%, Delaware, Michigan. There's so many stats talking about the kinds of benefits from these promise programs. But I'd like to just focus briefly on 2 ways that it would make our region more competitive and make us more coordinated locally, which I know is the focus of this group. I wrote down here, it's not a secret that Pennsylvania hasn't competed well in the state rankings for education funding. I appreciate you being forthright about that statistic up front there. And I will also say that I have a real fear right now as I see policymakers and universities across the country really confront a lot of the today, funding crisis with student loans, with different issues, and really rallying around this idea of making institutions more affordable. Now, I'm not afraid of that because I think it's a bad idea. I'm excited to hear that Promise program training might be going more fully down the tracks. What makes me really nervous and scared is that Pennsylvania will be at the train station haggling over the price of the ticket, and that we will be left behind with more and more policymakers and public sentiment pushes more toward this idea. And Pennsylvanians want to take that ride. I mean, I'm sitting next to a man who we've heard a couple different times the Pittsburgh Promise here, if you're not familiar with it. There was a great editorial recently by an Obama high school junior, Orly Trumbull, who just talked about his worries about the looming end of this program. Orly, was pleading with the city that we must turn to other college readiness initiatives to assist Pittsburgh students. The Promise, Orly wrote, has taught Pittsburgh a valuable lesson that young people want to achieve greatness and the community wants to support these students. In this marvelous editorial, I'm focused on Pittsburgh, but I think that's true across, the state. Young Pennsylvanians want us to compete, on their behalf. Our schools, I'm sure there's many other, we've heard from a couple different presidents, are desperate and dying to connect these students to our regional networks, to have them live and work in the state. It's my belief that the Promise program is the best way to outcompete neighboring states. So the answer is the same in 18, 25, 30, 45, 50 in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the answer for all this. Now, the other best to compete regionally. The other thing I would say is that the truth as a professor on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis is that my competitors are not other states. That's not my lived reality. My reality as a professor day by day. My competitors are Duncan, Sheets, Giant Eagle, all the places my students have to work relentlessly to afford their classroom experience. And let me be clear, I do not want to compete with the business community. I want to partner with them. The way I had partners when I was a college student, and I had an internship, copywriting for a business, I worked as a cashier a couple hours a week and took classes. The reality now, I cannot stress this point forcefully enough. That time-honored tradition of working through college has mutated into something frightening and unsustainable, where I now have students who, just to afford being in class with me, are submitting video responses at 2:30 in the morning on break at a loading dock somewhere. Stuff that's coming in that I can't believe. I have multiple colleagues who are now have changed their commutes and their lives to loan out cars to students so they can get to jobs to afford their tuition for fall semesters. So if it seems for Promise programs feels like a big lift, a big change, consider the change that's already happening on our campuses. For our students, for our faculty. And so I'll just close by saying that, I could tell a million of these stories, but I would strongly encourage this group to consider recommending a Promise, one that ensures will be geographically competitive and better, more equitably coordinated locally. The facts are on the side of the Promise program. I think the states are starting to lead this way, and I would ask this group to consider the weight and direction that you might apply your force. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to point out that you're right. Many states have Promise programs. One of the more interesting innovations in Promise programs is that some states like Michigan have what they call Reconnect programs, and they're specifically focused on adults who have some college, have not completed a credential, and they provide a pathway for adults to go that last step and to get that credential. And that's something that we can learn from other states in that space as well. So I appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Collins. I'm Vice President for Enrollment Services and Student Affairs here at CCAD. So I'm a new resident for about a year and 6 months. I'm from the state of Ohio, and just looking at it, dual enrollment in the state of Ohio is paid by the state. It's college credit plus for all students. So looking at affordability, I think the strategy would be if the state could pay for that dual enrollment for all students, because now we're asking families here in Pennsylvania to pay for that, and some families can't even afford to think about paying for that. And I also think too, community college should be free for all too, so we can look at ways and strategy and slate for free tuition for community college. And I'm just gonna say my third piece, because it might not go to this one, but also look at performance-based model for colleges and universities instead of the admissions enrollment. Because if we can work on really hard on retaining our students and getting them to that point, a performance-based model would show in the numbers.
Thank you very much. I do want to point out that we have a $14 million dual credit initiative that just launched. And there's a couple things that are really important about how the Department of Education is doing dual credit. One is that it is asking institutions that are participating, partnering with high schools, to identify credits that are going to be leading to an actual credential. So that you're not just taking gen ed courses in high school, you're actually moving towards a credential more quickly. The second thing that happens in this new round of dual credit is it should be free for the students. And then the third thing is that the focus that the department is putting is focused on not the high flying students that most of whom are probably already going to go to college, but like maybe the average student who isn't really sure whether or not they want to go to college or isn't really sure if they're college material. So the department's doing some really innovative things in dual credit, but I know that there are so many other states that really lean in heavily. But we at least are trying out models in the state right now that I think will lead the way and show how valuable dual credit can be for affordability and reducing time to degree. There's one. Oh, Quinn.
As you were saying, when we do have class online. If you are online, just to remind you to unmute or to make a comment, please raise your hand and you'll be able to make a comment once I can. And then we'll unmute yourself. So first we have Kevin Russo. You are able to make a comment. You will have to please unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Booz. I'm a Butler County Commissioner with Slip Rock University in our area as well. So thank you for holding these and hosting these. I wrote down a couple of things that I think are kind of important as we talk about the labor market and the college tuitions and how they interact. From a person who literally only went to college because they received a $500 scholarship and was told I couldn't go to college by multiple people, I can tell you that it was in the late 80s, early 90s, one of the hardest things to get into to do. I worked 40 hours a week while I went to college, and I held 18 to 21 credits at a time. So it's a struggle, and I think that for what we're seeing now is we have a hot labor market. We have a manufacturers. We have a lot. We're the #1 manufacturing county in Pennsylvania as far as making things, but they're high level things. People think manufacturing is coming home dirty, and so coming home dirty and so on. But that's not the case. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I think that part of it is that we have a heavy union presence here as well in southwestern PA, and they have been out recruiting people that are on the verge of going to college. Not sure. I heard somebody say that financially they can beat this game as an apprentice. They can get them to a 6-figure salary much quicker. It's a little more labor intensive, but they can get there. But what we're finding most of the market is asking for is a hybrid workforce, one that is a critical thinker and not afraid of labor. So, I'd look at associate degrees as being an objective. I think that getting to that point is critical for some, and then you will pick out of those that may want to go on further. But that's what the workforce is demanding now: is the ability to have somebody that can not only implement the plan, but read the plan, correct the plan. Construction's a big deal here. We have a lot of iron workers. We have a lot of pile drivers. There's engineers. We talked about that, but a lot of the engineers never worked in the field, and so they struggle sometimes. So I think that's our point from Butler County and economic developments. We worked with manufacturers a lot. We work with our universities as well, and they've actually developed several engineering degrees because it was highly recommended by some of the manufacturers. So that's my 2 cents. I really appreciate you doing this, and thank you for listening. But that's what we're seeing as a economic driver, and we don't want to lose the brain trust here. We want to keep them here. So if the sooner we can tie them into an employment and school, I think that's a great way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's have Dr. Bullock, who is waiting to speak, and then we can go back to our online folks.
Good afternoon, Quentin Bullock, President for the Community College of Allegheny County. One of the areas that I would like us to explore is regionalism. And why is that? We have a lot of surrounding communities that do not have access to 2-year colleges who could benefit by taking training, workforce training at any one of our 2-year institutions. But the challenge is they have to pay double tuition. So how can we look at providing affordable tuition for a non-sponsored county that's supplemented by some alternative funding source that then allows the colleges to be able to also create that 2+2 with a partnering 4-year institution, so that not only are they earning the workforce credential,
They have a seamless pathway to complete the credential beyond the initial goal. But the challenge is the double tuition that's outside of county.
So just to be clear to everybody, all community colleges have local sponsors, and if a student lives in a sponsorship area, they get charged the regular tuition rate. But very frequently, if you live outside of that sponsoring area and you want to attend the college, you get charged more, sometimes double, sometimes even triple. And so this is a problem for affordability, obviously, especially when the community colleges are our least expensive option for college access.
Sure, the next online commenter is Ken Dyer. Please unmute yourself.
Should we take another question?
Yeah, you can take another in person. Can you unmute yourself and we will come back to you?
Okay, so another comment from the room.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Chuca. I work at the Latino Community Center here in Pittsburgh. Prior to that, I worked in different universities and admissions offices, and I've seen this question been asked a lot. In attending higher ed, now when I work at a nonprofit. As an immigrant, as an American, I genuinely believe that the path to the American dream, which I still believe in, is through education, okay? Education is the way that a family can get and climb the economic ladder. I genuinely believe that. However, with that said, there is populations that are and demographics that are growing in our area that are not being presented with these opportunities, okay? I definitely feel that first generation and minority students all believe that this is the path forward to a better life. One of the things that I've been doing, I work very closely with a lot of different high schools and with Pittsburgh Public Schools, and I've been working with Latino students in all of Allegheny County to make sure that they have all the requirements, not just to graduate, but to help them with college applications and different things like that. One of the things that is a huge challenge that I see for a lot of students is that a lot of places have a specific policy that determines undocumented students as international students. Now, let me tell you, an undocumented student is not an international student, okay? An international student is someone who comes here to the States to pursue an education, and many times they take that degree back to where they come from, okay? Now, an undocumented student does not qualify for any federal or state aid, but they are still trying to pursue how to better themselves. And many institutions, because there's no, the traditional way of reading applications is gone, and now most of it's done by a computer. Right away, a lot of these people, they'll apply and they get pulled into the international student pool, and then they get billed as an international student, and you'll never see them at your college. I'll guarantee you that, because that's even higher than out-of-state tuition. So what I'm trying to say is, I urge you and I beg you to look at some of your policies, because there is a growing population that just wants to better themselves. And, you know, they want to be architects, plumbers, electricians, HVAC workers, and teachers, and they can't do any of these things because they're being billed an insane tuition that is, it's really cool to see that number and watch all your dreams go away. And to give you an example, I am working with the valedictorian of one of the high schools here in Pittsburgh. She applied to a lot of different schools, got accepted to all of them. But then I have to work with her to reach out to these universities who are asking her for an English proficiency test. So just keep that in mind. The valedictorian of a U.S. high school is being asked for a proficiency test. That doesn't make sense.
And granted, a lot of these universities recognize that this was done by a computer and they were able to waive that for them. But I just urge you guys to like not ignore the growing population that's, you know, in this area, that they just want to work and they want to better themselves. Thank you.
Appreciate that perspective. Thank you very much.
We do have 2 comments online. Kim, you are unmuted, and then Randy, you are right after Kim.
Okay, Kim Gower, Butler County Commissioner. I have a strategy in regards to tuition relief. There are some states that have a buy one, get one waiver for high demand fields. And under this reform, for every course in a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM program of strategic emphasis that a student is enrolled in, that student then is entitled to a free equivalent course in the same program. And this helps to do a couple of things. It helps with the affordability, but it also helps the university or the state system of meeting critical workforce and economic development needs required by the state. The other thing is there's states that have, you know, developed and coordinated resources, specifically technology, to help all learners understand how the degree choices align with career opportunities. And we don't have that here in Pennsylvania, but there's states that offer a free online dashboard, and they provide families with a wide array of information that is helpful and needed to make more decisions about their future. And these are just strategies using technology to make information more accessible and affordable. And this, you know, helps students to and families to streamline decisions regarding tuition and pathways as to where to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Randy, you are next.
Hi, Dr. Randy Goen, Deputy Chancellor for PASHE. Good to see you all. You know, we in higher ed, we can be pretty parochial. So let me just first say, it's not easy to get people to kind of lift their eyes and take this wider view. And you are helping us do that. So thank you for hosting these courageous conversations. You know, on this goal number 2 around affordability, I just wanted to comment quickly from the PASHE system level. Our presidents, of course, will provide much more regional information through the online tool that you provided. But from the system level, you know, we've tackled affordability, of course, the most direct way you can, freezing tuition since 2018. But as you all have said today, it's much more than just looking at the price tag, right? And so really our universities are taking a sort of portfolio approach to student affordability. And I think it's something that all institutions do, and if they don't, should. So part of that approach is controlling costs. So you can, you know, our system universities have taken, you know, 20% of costs out of staff and faculty headcount. We've reduced energy consumption, saving $40 million a year. We're saving through shared services by sharing sort of behind the scenes services with each other and operational shared services among the universities. All things that begs the question, is that something that could be scalable at a statewide perspective? And then of course, the other component of this is looking at how do you directly help students move through to completion better. And so our universities are focusing and doubling down on student supports, to help them to get to degree completion faster and helping community college students transfer easier, engaging different pathways, high school, dual enrollment, growing non-degree and stackable credentials. I think what I'm trying to say is there is no single silver bullet. It's an all of the above approach that we're all going to have to take. Even as we're increasing our retention rates and increasing our graduation rates, that's great. But if we're not doing all the other things, then we're going to miss the opportunity. And it's not just one area doing it, it's all the institutions doing it across the state. So again, thank you for bringing us together, and we are so glad to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Randy. And I think we're going to move on to the next goal. We could talk all day about affordability. The next goal though, really has to do with something that I think is really important, not just for the Commonwealth, but for the well-being of our post-secondary system. And that is to figure out how to ensure that our colleges and universities are centrally located in the economic development strategies of the Commonwealth. So last year, the Department of Community and Economic Development issued a 10-year strategic plan, and post-secondary education was in that plan. And that was really gratifying to see because it showed that an agency focused on the long-term economic prosperity of the Commonwealth understood and understands the importance of higher education in that space. And so when we talk about economic development, we're really talking about emerging economies and trying to find ways to seed innovation here in Pennsylvania, to develop new economies and new employers, and also to keep folks here, to ensure that there's a talent base here that's going to attract business from out of the state into the state and keep those good businesses in the state. So there's three things that this economic development strategic plan identified. One was to build the foundation for a strong, effective, efficient system of higher education, which I think we're engaged in right now, to responsibly and effectively reinvest in higher education, which is critically important because we're a low investment state, and to make college more affordable to all Pennsylvanians. And there's other elements of this strategic plan that are also really important. But I think what's also one of the things to note is if anybody's watching what the governor is doing, he is consistently focused on economic development. And so this is a critically important time for the Commonwealth to take advantage of that. The fact that you have a governor who really understands the importance of economic development and the relationship of higher education to economic development, and really dig deep in terms of what strategies might be available for us to ensure that our higher ed institutions are front and center. One thing that we know, or a bunch of things that we know, when you look at a state that is ranked very highly in economic development and creating a favorable environment for employers, they usually have a high overall investment, a high overall level of post-secondary attainment. In other words, there's a talent base, and people know that there's a talent base. The skills and the talent that exists in the state are aligned to today's and tomorrow's economies, emerging economies. There's a higher education ecosystem that is organized and responsive to future talent needs. So a nimble set of higher ed institutions that can coordinate and collaborate together. Incentives to innovate, and also strong alignment between post-secondary education and the state's economic development efforts. So we know that this is where our state should go if we want to be best in class in terms of tying together higher education with strong economic development. And we have some of these things in place, but I think the purpose of this conversation is to think at a strategic level about what else could we do to strengthen those connections. What do we need to know about economic development in the Southwest region as we think about what strategies would sort of align with meeting this goal? And what are some of the strategies overall or from a regional perspective that you think would help align our higher education system with the economic development goals of the Commonwealth? I think we're starting here and then. Can you hold it up?
Yeah, I was gonna say that one of the things is the richest man in the world went to Japan. And he went to California after the investment, and he stayed out there. So we lost him. This is the community of Southwest Pennsylvania where we had another richest man in the world named Carnegie, which is one of our universities named after over on the other side. So you have a bloom of people either at UPenn in Philadelphia or here in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon that can help us gain through economic development.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm a student and over here working at community college. I'm a student in the doctoral program over at CAS for the DBA program. And I have heard nothing from the state. So I mean, you got to get in there with trying to get PhDs or DBAs and say, hey, what's your BC? What are you working on?
Mhm.
So it can help us in this corridor. I was over, I had went to, New Jersey, and I was in that corridor. And I talked to the people from Penn State, they said 11 campuses are gonna get closed.
Mhm.
And they're all on this side of the state. On the Philadelphia side, it's a whole different game. So it's, you know, people like, on the A from California, 40 million people are there. Why is that? Because they got free education. We got in Pennsylvania, we got to do the same thing we're doing for us. We have to try to keep what we got. And at community college, nationally, our graduation rate is only 21.5%. So it's revolving door here.
We got a lot. Mhm.
Because I live in the Hill District. So I came a long way, but at the beginning, what got me into the military was I went to college, I couldn't afford my books. But guess what? I got an GI Bill. So the GI Bill, what did I get? What's the first thing that they make sure I had? My books. Before class even started. Like here, right now, I think our students get books or get their refunds like just before midterms. I mean, you went weeks without it. So the state has to get on top of getting these students books, get them what they need. Also, the GI Bill pays a stipend.
Right.
Now, you can't afford that because it's a little bit too much for you. Money. Here in Pittsburgh, I think it's 200 or 2,100 right now. For a month that the student gets while he's in school, or he or she. But I don't think the state could afford that, but some type of stipend, or you would tell people like my wife, who got a doctorate degree, she didn't pay anything because she went down to that Carnegie Library and got that book where you write those essays.
Okay.
Most people don't have a clue about that.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective as a student. We don't have enough of that when we're thinking about how to make college more affordable, and how to keep talented people such as yourself in the Commonwealth. I appreciate that.
Dr. Carlos, this, I was waiting on this area, so I got a little excited when it came up. So one of the things, innovation is in my pocket, right? So it's something that we're pushing, it's something that we're pushing at Partner for all the time. One of the things that we have to do when we're talking with our partners, CCAC, other local colleges, is the issue is that we have to figure out how to de-risk innovation, right? The folks, when we're building new programs in emerging fields, it's cost intensive. So when we can look at a program and look at the labor market and see that there's an emerging need. For example, last year, there were 400 job postings in dental hygienists. We had 30 to 35 completers in this region, right? But in order to prop up the dental hygienist program, it's going to take a lot of resources on the front end. And especially when you're doing a new program, especially at a community college, you don't always have the interest in because it's a new program. So to create a program and have some neutrality as it relates to revenue or even sustainability becomes difficult. So one of the things that we would like to see is a state fund that's pooled, that we can allow universities and community colleges, folks who are ready to partner with employers and workforce boards to identify the emerging labor market need and build out programs at the campuses in order for the help them achieve that.
Thank you very much. I think that partnership element we hear about fairly consistently, especially with regard to building new programs, such as the dental hygienist one.
Hello, Dr. Shaw. My name is Nick Newpower. I'm representing the PA Commission for Community Colleges. After a 17-year career as the president of Butler County Community College, it was great to hear from two of Butler County's great commissioners. And actually, that correlates to what I'm going to say. Dr. Shaw has long been an advocate. What I would be looking for is just a seat at the table. That sounds rather basic, but when you have a seat at the table and you work with industry and you work with different sectors of higher education, you would be amazed at what can result by just having that seat at the table and the back and forth. So in BC3's case, We had nurses at Penn Havens at Du Bois who received release time that helped us with clinical opportunities. We had great partnerships with other healthcare providers who realized that an investment into Butler County Community College made more sense from an ROI perspective than hitting the job market and looking for employers or employees. So with my community college hat on, just a seat at the table with all of the other sectors, and I'm looking forward to that from the state board. Thank you.
Thank you. Couple more. Yeah.
Chris Prasad from Barton University. I want to echo Nick's comments. It's me to see at the table. So this is a little area of frustration for me. For over 30 years, I've been a civic leader in this community, heavily involved in regional economic development, statewide economic development. In southwestern Pennsylvania, we still have a very, very fragmented system in our approach to economic development. You know, just in our university, since I became president, we've had double-digit growth in enrollment for 2 years in a row, and we're going to bring another 1,000 students living, working, learning, playing downtown pretty quickly. We don't have a seat at the table. And my academic research is in this area on how universities can be catalysts in regional economic development through tripartite and then quadripartite collaboration. And we have all the ingredients here in this region. We're blessed with it, but it's still a very highly fragmented system. And higher education needs to be able to take it, because higher education can be a catalyst.
So is the strategy suggestion from both yourself and Nick to create some entity that regularly brings higher education to the table during economic development conversations? Is that sort of where you're going with this?
I just think that seat at the table when economic development strategies are being developed
Gotcha.
for the region.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, I think we should take one more comment on this goal.
Sure.
Hi everyone again, my name is Pedro Triga, we're with the Latino Community Center. One of the things that I love about Pittsburgh is its history. And Pittsburgh is what it is today. Yes, Carnegie played a great role, but Pittsburgh is what it is today for two reasons: manufacturing and a great working class. Okay, that's what made Pittsburgh today. And if we want to talk about how to better our region and increase economic development, we need to increase both majors that deal directly into manufacturing and workforce jobs, and also increase investment into this region by manufacturing and bring jobs back to this region. We should, as a city, we should be making things again, you know. And I know, like, the steel industry is not what it was in the 70s and in the past, but I think that if we start to bring back Pittsburgh to what it made Pittsburgh, which is a working class, people will continue to move here for jobs, for work, like they did in the past.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the fourth goal, which is very related to economic development, and this is workforce development. So workforce development needs, as we're defining them as the State Board of Higher Education, are those post-secondary credentials and skills that are needed to fill current jobs and jobs that are likely to exist in the future, presuming there's no major change in Pennsylvania's economy. So these skills, and this is an important part of this when we talk about workforce development, because these are not just technical skills. These are also what we call core or essential or soft skills. And those are the things that we keep hearing employers say they need: critical thinking skills, ability to work on a team, ability to be flexible. So when we're talking about workforce development, we have to listen carefully to what employers are saying, because they're not just looking, for example, for accounting skills. They're also looking for a range of qualities that our higher education institutions might be able to foster. So I've got a fair amount of data for you on workforce development. We've got, I mean, obviously there's different ways to calculate these gaps, But in 2023, we had what we call the statewide workforce post-secondary credential gap that stood at 61,000. And what that means is that we were producing 61,000 fewer post-secondary credentials than our economy was demanding. That was in 2023. And you can see different kinds of credentials. It's not all about baccalaureate degrees, although they're really important. Associate's or certificate degrees are really important here as well. A really conservative forecast is that if we don't do something to turn this around by 2032, we're going to have a gap of about 218,000 jobs that cannot be filled because our higher ed institutions are not producing the credentials that would fill them. And I'm just going to recall for you that we've also got a credential attainment, an overall credential attainment gap, and we've got these demographic problems. So this is a serious problem for us because if we're not producing the talent and the credentials and the skills that our employers need, they may look elsewhere. And we know from a woman in the room that other states such as Ohio are competing hard against us. And oftentimes that's exactly what we're up against. But our regional post-secondary workforce credential gaps vary pretty significantly. And what you see here is an analysis of regional gaps. And I'll point out that in the Southwest region, there's a 52% unmet demand of jobs that require post-secondary credentials or skills versus what we're producing in this region. So that's pretty substantial. It's about 16,000 jobs as of 2023. When we look at the attainment levels in Southwestern PA, they compare pretty favorably. We're actually producing a higher number or percentage of students that have an associate's degree compared to Pennsylvania as a whole. The same is true with bachelor's degrees, and we're a little bit below in terms of graduate degrees. But there's a fair number of higher ed institutions here in Southwestern PA, which is not true in every part of the state. When we look at the credential types, you see there's a pretty good distribution between associates and certificates and bachelor's degrees. And I want to say this is not true in some other regions. We see a huge demand for bachelor's degrees in Southeastern PA, but if you go to some of the more rural areas of the Commonwealth, you see there's a real need for associates and certificate level degrees. But here, because this Southwest region encompasses both urban areas and rural areas, we see a pretty broad distribution. And then, I know I'm going through these data pretty quickly, but we have data to help us understand where exactly these needs are. And where, in this area, we've got a huge shortage in healthcare, which is true pretty much across the state. But managerial, business, and professional offices are the places where we're not producing enough credentials to fill those jobs. So I know I just went through a lot of data quickly, but the bottom line is, we have a post-secondary workforce credential gap in Southwestern Pennsylvania and across the Commonwealth. And the real question is, how are we going to fill that gap? Understanding that the analyses and the ways in which we might fill that gap really probably will vary by region, because we might like to think that people in, Philadelphia will travel to Pittsburgh to fill the jobs here, but they probably won't. And people in Pittsburgh are not going to go to Philadelphia. So we really need to think regionally in the Southwestern region, how might we begin to fill those workforce gaps by producing the kinds of credentials that are aligned with the jobs that currently exist and that we project will be existing within the next 10 years. Lots of hands. I say this every time. Lubna is really getting her steps in today. Every time we do a hearing.
And as Luke going survey around the room, for those online, if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. And we will work to move on.
Marty Ister, NCCAC board. I think if you want the soft skills for the employees of the future, you need to invest more and pay more attention to early childhood education. Because where children learn to be flexible, to have critical thinking skills, to work as a team, that all happens in early childhood. And in Pennsylvania, we have a state system that really has been dragged into recognizing early childhood as not birth to grade 3, which it should be, which it is internationally and in every other state in the union. They came up with pre-K to grade 4, because our higher education institutions weren't very nimble and didn't want to change their curriculum and didn't want to adjust to what the science told us is the developing child, which is both the grade 3. So I encourage you to really consider going back to what the definition is of early childhood and consider it as the first steps in preparation of a workforce that can provide the critical thinking skills and the flexibility and the working as a team and all that you want for a future workforce. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah, I'm the Vice President for Workforce Development at CCAC here. One of the things that we found, and it goes back to the former slide on economic development, working with corporations. My group does all 9 credit and short credential, or short-term credential training. And thank you so much for mentioning things like soft skills. We got an amazing leadership competencies academy. The biggest challenge for us is a lot of times those skills gaps require credentials that are not academic, technical, or not a certification. And the challenge is a lot of times there isn't funding for that unless it is employer sponsored. So I know one of the things that we are working on is I'm working with the provost here at CCAC, Dr. Sheila Wallace, on a program that translates credit, non-credit, some non-credit into credit credentials. So we can do that with some certifications. But one of the biggest challenges is a lot of the things that the employers come to us asking for is credentials that don't have any funding attached to them. So we pull out a piece of, our mechatronics program, a piece out of the welding program to upskill people in companies. There just isn't any funding for it. So I would really like to see, the expansion, and I know there's a lot of conversation around it, but the expansion of our funding to include more short-term credentials and also looking at those different competencies that are not academic or technical.
Mhm. Thank you. Unfortunately, we have no control over Pell. But there is a conversation right now about what we're calling workforce or short-term Pell that would expand financial aid for students that are not pursuing longer-term credentials. And so that may be something that emerges in the future, in the near future. Mm.
Hi, I'm Dennis Sloan. One of the ways, one of the solutions we can do to address the workforce is to turbocharge our apprenticeships. But the only way we're going to be able to do that really effectively is to widen the definition of what an apprenticeship could look like, and make increase the flexibility for colleges and employers working together to create new and innovative kinds of apprenticeships. I'm going through the process right now, setting up an apprenticeship for one of our programs, and we're running through those raindrops, trying to get the regulations. If we can get together and widen that scope, we can really turbocharge those apprenticeships.
Thank you. And obviously, there's a lot of conversation at the federal level right now about expanding apprenticeships. Mm-hmm.
Paige, you're gonna love me for this. Because I'm gonna make a suggestion that could address more than one of the goals of the spring.
That's good.
I think not enough people know that adults in the US can also be eligible for Pell Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And in 21 and 22 years, 21 and 22, Pennsylvania left $235 million of Pell money on the table. Now, those money allocated from Pennsylvania for Pell Grants that we did not use. So a strategy here can be a fairly aggressive communications campaign. In the first map that you showed that had the colorful counties in the state, most of the state was red, not politically, but although quite red in terms of attainment and credentials. So a communications campaign that says, listen, you can, for no money out of pocket, you can get upskilled and move from a job at the grocery store or at the department store or at the gas station to a job that pays more and meets the demands of the marketplace. Communications campaign.
I appreciate that. And we are hearing that at many of our hearings, that there's a real disconnect between the reality of higher education, its value and its cost, and what people know on the street. And it doesn't matter how much formal education you have. people do not know what the price tag actually is going to be, and they don't know what's going to pay off. But there are states that do this really well and can help create those kinds of communication, data-driven communications campaigns to help people navigate and understand what is actually possible. Because in many instances, it's not as expensive as people think if they choose the right path and can navigate.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Lady. I'm the executive director for the intermediate units in the state of Pennsylvania, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I just wanted to reiterate a comment that was made earlier. Currently, intermediate units are partnering with several higher education institutions in the state, specifically for para-educators who often are the demographic equivalent of what the student population is. And while they are job embedded opportunities of working, they can earn their teaching certification. So that is absolutely a workforce development issue that is specifically related to the education environment. I also want to reiterate this idea of any support that we can provide around early childhood is absolutely important. As a recovering superintendent of 14 years, I focused on K-12, but I will tell you that anytime we can impact the children coming in, that also helps the workforce with parents being able to get out into the workforce and contribute that way. And then my last comment is actually as a father of two 20-somethings. They obviously grew up in a house where both parents highly respected education and what education was all about, but they've also struggled to understand why they have to go on to get the credentials. And I would encourage this group to continue to talk to the 20-somethings. With all due respect to everybody in this room, I don't think we heard from the 20-something. And their world is incredibly different than ours. And what are we doing to gather information from them about what does customization look like as opposed to credentialing, which is obviously an established tradition?
Yeah, we are hoping we have a conversation set up tomorrow between one of my colleagues and 20 high school students that are juniors and seniors to get their perspectives. And I think something similar from actual either college students or 20-somethings that elected not to go to college to understand their perspective. So I appreciate that suggestion.
Hi, thank you all. I'm Drew Bennett. I'm assistant professor of philosophy here at CTE Academy campus. I'm just curious about the reference to kind of relying on employers' reports as to what they need. You mentioned, this sole strategy assumes there's no major change to Pennsylvania's economy, and of course, you have to assume that, right? But when we talk about the terms like future talent needs and tomorrow's economy, like in the last 5 years, like we have seen massive changes macroeconomically just in the last few months, right? We've seen like suddenly supply lines can dry up. We're entertaining de-dollarization, right, worldwide. Like these changes to look to individual employers or even kind of regional sectors of employers as even experts necessarily as to what we should be doing as higher education professionals. To me, that kind of puts the cart before the horse sometimes, because we can see like these firms are looking to their interests, and we can align to those interests at times, but like we are talking about a world economy, and like we are directly implicated by that. Like there's a direct trickle-down effect very immediately, and I find it very disturbing to like take our marching orders from employers who can have to turn on a dime. Like literally when these economic changes happen, as we know they will, with increasing changes economically, ecologically, etc. Thank you.
So I think you're putting your finger on an inherent tension, which we might call a creative tension between the needs of employers and the mission of our institutions, and how to make sure that the students are not receiving credentials that may be outdated in a year. And so I think, apropos of this suggestion to bring these two sectors together to speak honestly about sort of, how those relationships might be more productive and overcome some of those barriers. I think it's a helpful suggestion, a strategy for us.
In the interest of time, there's several people who want to comment, because there's two more comments, and then I feel like we need to move on.
I will do what you tell me to
Yeah.
do.
Or there's two goals, so hopefully people who have an interest in this goal will have an interest in the other two. And I apologize if we can't get to everyone, and there is a survey. All the survey feedback will be treated, equally as weighty as what goes on in everything. So that's it's considered a real way of understanding it.
Good afternoon, Jeff Dick, Assistant Regional Director for the PA Criminal Systems and Workforce Development. So I've been writing lots of notes here, but I'll keep it brief, and they're all over the place, but just as folks will probably just write us down. I think one of the keys is industry partnerships and leveraging the resources that are available and the funding that's available. Not just so much leveraging it, getting that information out to our employers, and communication out to our employers and what's available and the resources. There's numerous funding opportunities out there. A lot of our employers don't know about them, partners don't. Under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. Now, there's limits on that, but we have other smart grants, industry partnership grants that are very specific, short-term training, the welding that was mentioned, that can be available or created off of the needs of the employer. So I think having the employers at the table is very, very important. Pay while you learn, I think, is critical. And apprenticeships that mentioned, but with our younger population, they're learning so they're learning while they're earning those credentials. Apprenticeships, on-the-job training, critical. And then lastly, the become a worker. So we have to upskill our workforce now and utilizing technology. We don't have the population, but can we make them more productive? Technology, AI is out there, not to replace jobs, but to make our staff, our workers more productive. This then also opens up entry-level opportunities, so where we can get into the untapped workforce, individuals out of reentry, and upskilling those individuals to these other positions in the career.
Thank you.
One more comment on this whole paper.
Thank you. John Anderson from West University. In order to make workforce development work, you've got to have a job, a credential, and someone who's interested in it. Being relatively new to Pennsylvania, I see this work in many places, especially across passing institutions incredibly well. The strategy we need to implement is to have a system for people to develop best practices when all three of those fit together and clearly share them in some way across sectors in the higher ed ecosystem.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, we've got two goals left, but I think we can get through them because they're a little bit, usually have a little bit narrower conversation. So goal number 5 that the state board adopted was to ensure accountability and efficient use of state funds. And this is a critically important goal at a time when some people question the value of higher education and may also question the degree to which our resources are being used effectively. So one of the duties of the State Board of Higher Ed is to collect data and information to offer recommendations that promote more accountability, more transparency, more efficient and effective use of our higher education state funds. So tracking and analyzing a range of indicators is a critically important part of this that we're charged with developing. So a few things to note, remove that. We have a lot of data in Pennsylvania, and our higher education institutions collect a lot of data. But what we do not have is a centralized repository for the data that does exist, nor do we have a standard way of defining variables and collecting information. And so what that ends up meaning is that we don't have a standard way for showing how our state resources provide a return on investment. That's a really important thing that our sector needs to do better at, and the State Board of Higher Education can help that happen. We have individual sectors such as community colleges or PASHE institutions that report a lot of data, but they define the data a little bit differently, so you can't merge that data. And there are some national data systems that are useful, but you can't combine them. And also, factually speaking, those data systems are being dismantled right now. So we have a couple different challenges by way of making sure that there's transparency and accountability in the Commonwealth to ensure that people understand that our higher education institutions are using resources well to advance the needs of the Commonwealth and the people that live here. Hold on, this looks like it froze on me. So I'm just going to stop there and ask if you have specific ideas, strategies on sort of how to ensure that that transparency and accountability exists in a more consistent manner across our higher education sector, and whether there are some specific things about Southwestern Pennsylvania that would sort of help us understand how to achieve that goal here, if there's something that's specific to this region, or whether you may think that this is something that's more of a statewide issue that needs to be addressed at a statewide level.
That's what we most of it. Sometimes my wife will see something on sale, like buy a bunch of cucumbers because they're a good price, throw out away. Just can't eat them in town. Sometimes things look like they're efficient or save money in the short term, but not necessarily so in the long term. But I'm worried about, and I saw this happen last year when we tried to open a new program, that we were questioned substantially on, well, why do we need you to have that program? Because there's another school that already has that program in your general area. If we allow only one or two programs of a certain type in a certain area, that leads to monopoly. Iron sharpens iron. We gotta have competition. And it worries me that in the name of efficiency, might be limiting some competition that will make us all better. So that's just something I've experienced, and I want to make sure that that's considered.
I appreciate that. And we have also heard the flip side of that coin, which is that too much competition actually weakens the programs that exist. And you hear about that particularly in more rural areas where there's fewer people that are available to attend like really high need programs like nursing or something like that. Mm-hmm.
Center-wise, I understand that you said where some of the programs in higher ed lead to, right? And one of the things me and my colleagues have been talking about is the fact that we do collect so much robust data in different entities around the state, but we can't share the data with each other. And that becomes, it makes it much more difficult for us to really source a solution if we can't share the data. I think a data sharing agreement between the Department of Ed and L&I would be great for us as we're trying to map out the needs, the emerging needs for the system of education, and us informing from a workforce standpoint. I think that would be really good.
Thank you. Any other comments on this particular goal? Anything online? Oh, there's somebody.
No, just reminding those online, if you'd like to comment, please raise your hand.
I didn't say the department of science. So what I come across is sometimes I teach the students from workforce. Now they're all in unions, they're never on this class. They're great students. But the thing is, sometimes I'm like a little hesitant because I'm trying to force them into possibly getting a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. And they're like, well, we can't go to school during the day because we're working on that we can't like. And I'm like, I think there's an engineering program at night program in the park, but I'm not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they get locked into some stuff because they're in the union, and they kind of sometimes hurts their options.
So, but what I hear too is that there's a lack of transparency, so that it's hard for students who have particular needs to quickly get information about which programs exist that might meet their needs. And I think that's an important element.
So Katie, I think.
Yeah.
Also made some items
Yes. Yep. Here's goal 6. Strengthen the fiscal health and stability of the higher education sector. If anybody's reading the newspapers, they know that there are institutions in the Commonwealth that are at financial risk. Some of them have closed. Some of them are considering closing, merging. You also have Penn State University that is considering closing 12 branch campuses. So this becomes a concern for us as we think about how we help our higher education sector navigate fiscal instability and potentially provide the sector with resources that it needs to be able to do that. These are things that basically I just said, except it's important to know that some of our regions have a wealth of higher education institutions. So the closure of one may not have a critically important negative impact on a region that's rich with higher ed institutions. But in other regions of the Commonwealth, when you see an institution close, it dramatically reduces access to higher education. So those are things that we have to be concerned about if we're concerned about making sure that every region of the Commonwealth has access to a robust menu of higher education institutions. One thing I want to point out before we open this to comment is that I'm putting up here in front of you the 10-year change in the number of high school graduates in Southwestern Pennsylvania counties. And what you see here is every single county is projected to lose a fair number or percentage of high school graduates over the next 10 years. And that's another area of concern, of course, when we think about how many of our institutions are dependent upon tuition to stay afloat. If there's fewer students, they will have less tuition. And oftentimes when you see fiscal instability among institutions, it's among institutions that are small. So that's something that we need to think about. We rank 40th in the country in terms of the total amount of money we spend on higher education. And this has been true. We have been bottom of the bin for a long time. This is something that Governor Shapiro really hates to hear, and it's true. Other states spend more money on direct appropriations and also in terms of financial aid. So we have kind of set a table for our higher ed institutions that is not as supportive as it might be in terms of ensuring that they are strong and fiscally stable. Our last question, what should we do about this? How do we strengthen the fiscal health and stability of our higher education sector? And are there things in Southwestern Pennsylvania in particular that you want to draw attention to when you're offering strategies to meet this goal?
Are you, my mic has been enabled, so I'm assuming you're allowing me to speak?
Yes, you're able to speak.
Okay. This is Tuesday Stanley, and I'm with the Pennsylvania Commission for Community Colleges. And I would like to suggest that higher ed is not adept at mergers. That's not why we went into higher ed, but perhaps that needs to be a consideration for institutions. And I would say that they consider it when they are in a position of strength, rather than when they are in dire need of financial assistance. So perhaps the state could have experts in mergers and acquisitions available to higher ed to help to educate the board and the administration on how to navigate this space, to be able to determine if their institution needs to merge and when would be the opportune time to do that, so that access is not prohibited, but that institutions can merge and strengthen what they do and perhaps cut expenses.
Thank you, Tuesday.
One more comment? I have one more comment. Kathy, you are free to unmute and make a comment.
Thank you. So my comment would be, think about rewarding the behavior you want to see. We want to increase enrollment. We want more students to stay in the region. We want to see retention and graduation rates increase. could there be incentives that you provided to these institutions that are reaching these goals that would encourage them to continue to do this work and give them more resources to do that work? So that would be one thing that I would encourage you to see. And then the barriers that are stopping students from obtaining their career aspirations, if more resources could be placed in our hands to help those students reach their destination.
Great, thank you so much. I wish we could talk more. We're right up against time. And I don't like to identify favorites in terms of regional hearings, but this was a particularly rich regional hearing. And I think it's because there are so many different perspectives represented in this room. And you could all hear each other and hear the different perspectives, and so could we. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my chair, Cindy Shapiro, and she's going to close out this part of our meeting. I just want to thank you all so much for being here. It is truly invaluable, the feedback that you're giving us. And you will see a lot of this reflected in our strategic plan when it is adopted in September. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're welcome to stay. We're going to have a brief board meeting. You're welcome to go, but we are going to continue. Let me then thank you all for being here. As Kate said, we had college presidents, we had CEOs, we key organizations and businesses, so many great board members of institutions. So a lot of great perspectives, and we really thank you. This is a terrific turnout and a terrific public hearing. So let's go on to our business meeting. I am going to suspend the order that is in the agenda. And if you quietly would appreciate it, we're going to start doing the meeting, as we leave. Okay, that's not. We're just going to go ahead. Board members online, I hope you can hear me. I want to suspend the order of the agenda so that we can get to the votes in case board members have to leave and Senator Costa has a meeting. So if that's okay, I am going to call on Dr. Kevin Washoe, who is chair of the bylaws committee, to present the bylaws, and then we will have an action by the board to vote on bylaws for the state board. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. The update here from the bylaws committee. The bylaws committee met once since our last meeting on April 16th. It's completed a recommended set of SBHE bylaws in 3 sets. The draft bylaws are modeling on those of other Commonwealth boards and several higher education according to council models in other states. In November, the committee was offered an analysis of Act 69 language that would bear on the bylaws and models from coordinating councils in Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana, Oregon, and Texas. In our December meeting, Eric Papazanian, Executive Vice President of the Association of Governing Boards, also met with the committee to discuss the basic content and function of bylaws. Following this background work, the bylaws were created by sequential review of 3 draft sets. The first dealing with the powers and duties of the board, the second addressing the functioning of the board, and third and finally the staff and conflict of interest. Draft bylaws represent very traditional sections of issues addressed in Commonwealth Board and Coordinating Council bylaws. Many members were asked for discussion and feedback on each set, and the bylaws were adjusted accordingly. The final set was circulated early this week. Many members indicated their assent to the bylaws being submitted to the full board. A consensus of members agreed that these bylaws should be presented for the board for a board vote and consideration. The committee was largely in agreement as the bylaws were reviewed in 3 segments, and the most significant area of discussion was the composition of the executive committee. Madam Chair, I'd also like to thank the board staff for great work, specifically Luna, your great work in getting this done and made bylaws fun, actually. So thank you very much for your work, the whole team work, and the community work. Very proud of all of that. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. And Cindy just reminded me we should ask for public comment.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Okay, I think hearing none, we will now, in addition to thanking Chair Washoe for your leadership and for the dedication and work of the committee as a whole, let me ask if we can have a motion to approve the bylaws. Only members of the board. Is there a motion? Thank you. I need a second. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now it's open for discussion. Is there any discussion? I don't see any in person. Harry, is anybody raising their hand online? Okay. All right. I will also ask, we do still have a quorum, correct? We still have.
No, just to remind the board members who are on, they are able to unmute themselves and make a comment.
Okay, but yeah, all right, so let's give you a chance to do that. Any board members who want to make a comment, unmute yourselves. If you haven't. I'm looking for hands, I don't see anything.
I see Andrea and Dr. Weaver unmuted, but then.
Okay. All right, I don't see any hands raised though, right there. Okay, if anybody wants to speak, I don't want to, run you over with steamroller, so please. So in any case. Give it one more second. Don't see anybody right there with the hand raised. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote then, please. All in favor of an action to pass the bylaws for the State Board of Higher Education, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much. I am going to skip my comments. They're not all that interesting. And they are mostly once again to thank everybody, but in the interest of time, we can skip chair remarks, I think, for this meeting. Why don't we have committee reports so that we're updated on the goings on of the committees, if we still have the committee chairpersons present, and then I will ask Kate to give her executive director's report. You know what, we have another action in past the minutes. Okay. I forgot about that. So let's do that too, so we make sure we get the minutes passed before people leave. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Is there a second? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. All right, so I do think it's important that we get updates because there's so much activity going on as we continue to work toward our deliverables and stand up the board in its work. So let me first turn, if I can, to Diane Macri, designate a Representative Topper, to provide an update for the Performance Funding Board Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The council is continuing to review different funding models, and we're working diligently towards a final report of recommendations, which is due very soon. So not a lot to report, but we're working very hard.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate that and appreciate your work. Let me turn now to the committee chairs for their updates. You won't hear from me because my strategic planning committee update is the hearings. And I don't think we need to hear from Chair Washoe either on bylaws. I think we're updated on that. So may I call on Dr. Bieber, who's chair of the Transfer of Authority Committee, to give her report.
Yes, thank you, Chair Dr. Shapiro. The Transfer of Authority Committee has been working on an initial set of recommendations for transfer, focusing mainly on higher education related responsibilities of the State Board of Education. The committee met on April 16th with a subcommittee of the State Board of Education members to begin a conversation about areas that should be transferred to the State Board of Higher Education. Another meeting has been scheduled for next week. After consultation with the State Board of Education Committee, the State Board of Higher Education Transfer of Authority Committee will submit initial recommendations for full transfer to the full board this spring, and then for transmittal to the General Assembly. Because of the required coordination with the State Board of Education and its meeting schedule, the recommendations may be slightly later than the May 1 legislative deadline. That concludes my update. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Beaver, very much. Okay. Let me ask President Long if you could provide a brief update on the activities of the Data Committee, which is obviously of a lot of interest in her today's hearing. Okay, all right. We will get Dr. Long's update at our next meeting. Let me now turn to Dr. Shaw for your executive director's report.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm just going to keep this really brief because people are probably sick of my voice, but I will send the rest of my update to the board in written form, but I just want to take a little bit of time to introduce the leadership team that we are putting together here at the State Board of Higher Education. So excited. We have multiple new members. We have Carrie Amon, who joined the State Board of Higher Ed as the Director of Economic and Workforce Development. She was also doing double duty, managing our remote participation. Carrie comes to us from the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association, where she served as Executive Director. And she's also a seasoned state servant, having served in senior leadership positions in both governor's office and at the Grand Industry. Delighted to have her. Dr. Greg Kinzel has taken on the role of our Director of Information Systems and Strategic Analysis, and he's going to be providing the leadership that we need on collection and analysis of data that the board is going to need to inform its work, and that obviously the public is seeking as we work to make things more transparent and available to people in the Commonwealth. He joins us from the University of Pittsburgh, where he served as the Director of Data and Impact Management. And I have known Greg for a good 20 years. We are professional colleagues from the field of higher education. Finally, I want to announce that Mr. Steve Essick, who is currently PSER's press secretary and legislative liaison, will be joining us in mid-May as our Director of Public and Legislative Affairs. He will be leading our efforts to communicate the value of our higher education sector, to ensure strong and productive relationships with our colleagues across Harrisburg, and to ensure that the board's work and progress is effectively communicated to a wide range of stakeholders. Together with a new administrative officer and our chief of staff, Linda Mayan, who, as many of you know, is an attorney with deep expertise in post-secondary law, we have an incredible leadership staff that brings, I think it's fair to say, an unprecedented level of expertise and capacity to support the board and to support the Commonwealth in strengthening higher education in Pennsylvania. So with that, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that if you had anything else to add, that we don't have time for these, so that's great.
For sure.
All right, let me just say before we conclude, I'm going to just go back to bylaws for a minute, because that was a very important piece of business that we finished. With the passage of bylaws for the State Board of Higher Education, that ad hoc committee no longer has a mandate and can go out of business. Now, it happens that the draft bylaws do contain a provision for a governance and leadership committee. And so in future meetings, I look forward to convening such committee, with the help of everybody on the board, of course, a standing committee of the board to address the broader ongoing issues of excellence in governance, leadership, board education, and our own board leadership and board membership. So we will be picking up that topic again. And again, many thanks to you, Kevin, for leading that effort.
Chair Blashill was sad.
Yeah, I know. It's the first ad hoc committee we're retiring.
He wants more work on.
It's sad. No problem. No problem. So I think with that, again, we'll thank everybody for your indulgence, everybody on the board and the staff for staying a little bit longer so we could get our pressing business done. And for a terrific hearing, for all of your dedication and hard work. I can't tell you how much it's appreciated. I think with that, if there is no new business, our meeting is adjourned. Thanks again, everyone. Oh, and don't forget, one more hearing. One more hearing.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
I mean, you were the first committee chair to bring something across.